The first time I walked into a springhouse behind a dairy barn outside Mount Hope, Ohio, I expected a machine. Holmes County was baking. It was the middle of August. What I found instead changed me. The lane was white with heat. My boots kicked up chalk dust. The air smelled like cut hay, manure, hot clover, and sun on gravel. My shirt stuck to my spine before I reached the door. Then I stepped under the stone lintel. The temperature fell across my face, my wrists, and the back of my neck. Inside, the light thinned out. The smell shifted to wet limestone and wood. I heard water moving somewhere under the floor. I waited for the usual sound. The condenser, the fan, the metallic rattle of forced comfort. Nothing came. No compressor hum, no buzzing motor, no outdoor unit coughing itself to death in the weeds. I stood there for 11 minutes looking for the expected thing. It wasn't there. And that was the moment something in my head gave way. I had been wrong about cooling. You probably have too. Cooling was never supposed to begin with a machine. It was supposed to begin with moisture, shade, mass, and airflow. The machine came later. The bill came after that. When I walked back toward the farmhouse, I started noticing details I would have ignored before. Window pairs lined up for cross-draft. Porch depth matched the summer sun angle. The cellar door stayed cracked. The washroom sat where shade lasted longest. Then I saw a shallow tray of white pellets on a shelf near the coolest wall. Not decorative, not mysterious, just salt. The pattern snapped into focus. Dry the air first. Let evaporation do the rest. Make the building help you. Stop fighting physics with a louder box. I remember standing in that doorway and feeling embarrassed. Not because the idea was hard, because it was simple. You spend years being taught that comfort comes from complexity. Then you step into an old stone room and feel your body vote against the lesson. Your skin knows before your mind does. Dry air changes everything. Slow shade changes everything. Water changes everything. The old builders were not guessing. They were observing. I've been going back to Holmes County every summer for 4 years. Every visit adds another piece, and every piece tells the same story. The building industry did not forget this by accident. Here is the promise of this video. A bag of salt that costs $11 to $18 can change the feel of a lived-in room by 12 to 18 degrees. It does that with moving air and evaporation, not a compressor. And yes, this works even if your house was built 50 years ago. Stay with me, because what I found in Holmes County uses the same physics the Persians used. They made desert buildings livable more than 2,000 years ago. This sounds strange only because you were taught to think heat is the main enemy. It is not. Humidity is the trap. The U.S. Department of Energy said in its 2017 HVAC technology assessment that liquid desiccant cooling uses salts like lithium chloride and calcium chloride. Their job is to absorb water vapor from the supply airstream. That sentence matters more than most people realize. Your own body proves it. A wet bandana around your neck feels cold fast on a dry day. The same bandana feels nearly useless when the air is already swollen with water. Evaporation stalls. Sweat stays on your skin. Heat stays in your body. Salt changes that first condition. Calcium chloride is hygroscopic. It pulls water out of passing air. Once the air is drier, a wetted surface can shed heat fast again. That is why this feels less like a trick and more like a missing step. Think about a car radiator. The radiator does not create cold. It moves heat to a place where heat can leave. This does the same thing with air and moisture. First, the salt lowers the moisture load. Then water can evaporate and carry heat away. The sequence is everything. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory modeled desiccant-enhanced evaporative cooling. It found 30% to 90% less yearly source energy than standard air conditioning. In the same work, estimated savings reached 25% in Houston and 81% in Phoenix. In plain language, that is what a real performance gap looks like. In field terms, treat it as an equivalent coefficient of performance. You are getting roughly 3 units of useful cooling effect for every 1 unit of low-grade input. A conventional system often burns premium electricity just to overcool wet air and then reheat it back to comfort. It works, but it is clumsy. The Department of Energy also estimated that HVAC alone consumes 5.35 quadrillion BTUs in U.S. commercial buildings each year. That is about 30% of total commercial building energy use. That gap represents a massive market in equipment, replacement parts, refrigerant, installation, and service contracts every single year. And that is why you have never heard of this. And there is one more piece. Salt does not cool by magic. It cools by lowering dew point before evaporation begins. Once the air is drier, even a simple wetted pad starts acting like a heat elevator. The pad is not making cold, it is giving heat a clean exit route. That knowledge never disappeared. It was set aside. It was waiting. I saw the living proof near Berlin, Ohio, on a day that reached 91 degrees before mid-afternoon. The lane was still. No condenser cages spun beside the walls. No metal cabinet roared under the windows. I walked from open sun into a washroom and felt the air go cool and still around my hands. There was almost no sound, just water slipping past stone. A horse shifted in shade beyond the barn. A screen door clicked once in the kitchen. That was it. A man named Reuben stood beside me near a shelf where crocks of butter once sat. He spoke in the plain way people do when they are not trying to impress anyone. He said his family had handled summer this way for 4 generations in Ohio and much longer before that in Pennsylvania. Then he tapped the wall. He said their older people learned from families who came through the Palatinate and Canton burn. In those places, cool rooms, cellar air, and moisture control already belonged to farm life. He did not romanticize it. He just shrugged and said, "It keeps working." After that, I walked the outside again and looked for every cheat modern houses lean on. There were none. The eaves were deep. The porch shaded the wall by noon. Vines covered the hottest exposure. A transom sat above the stair hall. The cellar stayed linked to the kitchen through a door that could breathe at night. Even the outbuildings were placed to steer breeze, not block it. Nothing was decorative. Every board had a job. Every opening had a season. That is when I understood the salt was not the whole system. It was one part of a building that cooperated. He was right. That knowledge never disappeared. It was filed away. It was waiting. And a historical document sitting in plain sight still confirms the pattern. USDA Design number 1341 proves it. The design appeared in the 1929 Farm Building and Equipment Plan series. It shows a separate milk house built to cool and protect dairy without mechanical refrigeration. Same problem. Same answer. Go back far enough and you stop seeing inventions. You start seeing memory. In Yazd, Persian builders raised wind catchers over courtyards and pushed hot air down across cooler water and masonry. One surviving Badgir at Dawlatabad rises 33 meters above the garden and still makes the principle obvious. Move air, dump heat, protect shade. Ancient Egypt reached the same logic from another angle. Some of the earliest wind-catching and evaporative methods appear about 3,300 years ago, with air drawn across wetted materials at the opening. Different landscape, different materials, same physics. The Persians didn't read this in a textbook. They figured it out the way all real knowledge gets discovered, by paying attention to what the earth was already doing. Every civilization that mastered brutal summer heat arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from Canton Burn and the Palatinate to Pennsylvania about 300 years ago. They kept building it because it worked, and because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. The turning point came in May 1922. Willis Carrier unveiled the centrifugal refrigeration machine. It came backed by nearly 20 new patents. Its business model made comfort cooling scalable for theaters, stores, offices, and later homes. That decision protected far more than a machine. It protected every future dollar tied to compressors, coils, refrigerants, ducts, and service calls. A cool room made with airflow, masonry, water, and a sack of salt threatened that future. Not because it failed, because it sold too little. The suppression did not happen in one smoky room. It happened by writing one assumption into the rules until the assumption felt like nature. Comfort became inseparable from machinery. Once that happened, passive skill stopped looking like knowledge and started looking like nostalgia. You can still see the mechanism in the standards language. ASHRAE addenda carried forward baseline text on dehumidification and reheat. Read that twice. The baseline starts with the machine. The architecture comes second. The old methods are not evaluated as defaults. They are treated as deviations. Then the Allies locked in. Carrier sold the cooling hardware. General Motors and DuPont formed Kinetic Chemicals in 1930 and profited from the spread of Freon-based cooling. The National Broadcasting Company took prestige-cooled space in New York in 1927. That helped turn air conditioning into a public spectacle instead of a quiet building skill. Different institutions, same incentive. More conditioned floor space meant more hardware. More hardware meant more refrigerant. More refrigerant meant more service. More service meant a permanent bill. An entire field of knowledge disappeared from architecture schools, building codes, engineering habits, and homeowner common sense. Not because it failed, because it wasn't profitable. And the pattern never ended. In 2021, the International Code Council changed the development framework for the International Energy Conservation Code. The fight was really about who gets to shape building rules. In 2022, the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute spent $964,622 on federal lobbying, according to Open Secrets. In 2023, contractor groups kept pushing energy choice legislation and code positions that protect equipment sales as policy, not preference. That is how suppression looks now. It does not arrive wearing a black hat. It arrives as a standard. It arrives as a rebate schedule. It arrives as a code interpretation. It arrives as a contractor saying, "This is just how houses work. Nobody told you. Not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you a bigger condenser." The financial motive is simple. Passive cooling sells fewer boxes. Fewer boxes mean fewer installs. Fewer installs mean fewer service renewals. The U.S. HVAC services market alone was valued at $25.6 billion in 2019 by ACA's own industry figures. Every low-energy alternative installed is a unit of that market that never gets sold, refilled, replaced, or renewed. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people starting fresh, stay with me. Because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to tear up your foundation, rip out your existing system, or buy equipment. You need a weekend. What you build first is simple. It is a narrow passive cooling box. It sits in a shaded north or east window and feeds the room you actually live in. Make the shell 24 inches wide, 36 inches tall, and 12 inches deep. Use half-inch exterior plywood or a rigid HDPE tote cut to the same size. Line the sun side with low-E radiant foil. Slope the floor 2% toward the outside so any condensation leaves the box instead of rotting it. Inside that shell hang 2 shallow trays of calcium chloride pellets. Use the same ice melt grade sold in 20-pound bags for $11 to $18. Leave a 3-inch air gap behind the trays. Below them, set a 4-inch cellulose evaporative pad wrapped in muslin cotton. Let the lower edge dip 1.5 inches into a water pan. Run the outlet through one 6-inch collar into the room. Then add the pull. Use an 8-inch Schedule 40 PVC chimney painted matte black and rise at least 10 feet on the outside wall. Sun heats the chimney skin. Warm air rises. The box draws replacement air through the salt and then across the wet pad without a fan and without a motor. If your window is wider, open the face to 30 inches and keep the internal path tight. If your room is 180 to 240 square feet, one box proves the principle fast. If the room is 300 square feet, build 2. Seal the joints with polyurethane caulk. Use stainless screws. Keep the water tray opaque so algae stays down. Add a small screen at the intake so insects do not colonize the pad. Orientation matters. Do not put this in a west window. Late sun will punish you. Morning shade is your ally. Put the chimney where it catches long summer light and where prevailing wind does not force hot backflow down the pipe. A 5-degree backward tilt at the cap helps shed rain. A simple drip edge saves the siding. Calcium chloride is not optional. Table salt causes weak moisture pull and leaves you with warm, damp air. Low E foil is not optional either. Bare plywood reheats the air by noon. The first build takes one Saturday morning if you cut cleanly. Give yourself 40 minutes more if you flash the chimney through siding. Foil and caulk run $7 to $14. The salt costs $11 to $18. The cellulose pad costs $18 to $26. The PVC runs $22 to $37. Plywood or tote material costs $36 to $58. If you add screens, flashing, and screws, the total still lands between $104 and $171. On a 95-degree day, when outside humidity sits above 60%, this setup can deliver outlet air in the mid-70s. It can make a closed bedroom, office, or pantry feel radically different by late afternoon. The room will not feel refrigerated. It will feel dry, breathable, and calm. That difference matters more than most thermostat numbers. Maintenance is small. Rinse the pad once a month in hard use. Refill the water pan every few days in peak heat. Replace or regenerate the salt once a season in light use, or every 10 to 14 days in brutal humidity. If you see rust forming on nearby fasteners, your airflow path is leaking. Fix the seal before you blame the method. And one more thing, do not oversize the outlet. Bigger is not better here. If air moves too fast, contact time falls and moisture removal drops. Slow, steady draw wins. Your conventional central air system costs $6,800 to one tier of $14,400 to install. It costs $180 to $286 per month to run in hard summer. It lasts 12 to 18 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $104 total to $171 total. It lasts 8 to 12 years with basic maintenance. Your choice. Everything I've covered across this channel now lives in one place. Springhouse food storage systems, lime wash mold control methods, gravity well water backup. Step by step, season by season, room by room, in the order the families actually use it. Link is in the description. But stay here, because what Ruben built is the part nobody is talking about right now. If you're the kind of person who believes real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, listen closely. You already know what to do. Hit subscribe. Not for me, for what comes next. Because this is not a channel. This is a quiet movement of people who have decided they're done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop your county, your July electric bill, and whether your grandparents used a cellar, porch, or springhouse in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I'm going to show you what a 1946 Penn State document reveals. It keeps a pantry and sleeping room cooler with nothing but lime, brick, and moving night air. And the state agricultural engineers who knew it 80 years before telling you to buy another appliance. You're not going to want to miss that one.